What's going on, everybody? Thank you so much for clicking on this video. We are back today with another fantasy football video that will help you hopefully win your leagues this year. Today, we are looking at sleepers. Everybody loves the sleeper because if you hit on one, you increase your chances of winning by tenfold. So, in today's video, we're going to look at every single team in the NFC and one sleeper from each team. Now, a couple things you need to know before we get into it. This is based on half PPR leagues, not full PPR, not standard. We're going right in the middle with half PPR scoring leagues. Now, another thing you need to know is in my definition of a sleeper, I just came up with a number, is any player that is currently being drafted outside of the 11th round or after the 11th round of a 12-team league. So any player that has a ADP of 132 or higher cannot be considered a sleeper in my video. They have to be above or higher than 132 average draft position, which again is after the 11th round of a 12-team league. I will be using fantasy calculators, ADP, and what they do is they look at a number of drafts within the last 5 to 7 days. They look at a few thousand drafts within the last 5 to 7 days, and they rank their ADP. That way, it's a little more representative, I believe, of who will be going where in your drafts that should be upcoming, maybe this weekend or next weekend. If you look at ADP from the entire offseason, you're going to get a lot of crooked numbers just because there's guys that have risen and fallen. For example, Dameon Pierce, who 2-3 weeks ago was probably, being drafted in the 12th, 13th, 14th round. Now he's going to go in the 7th, 6th, 7th, or 8th round most likely. So that's what you need to know before getting into the video. And without further ado, let's get right into it. First up on the list we have is the Arizona Cardinals, and my sleeper for the Arizona Cardinals is second-year wide receiver Rondale Moore. Currently, Rondale Moore is considered the fourth wide receiver on the depth chart. However, I expect that to change very, very soon, as we have a suspended DeAndre Hopkins for the first 6 weeks of the season, and we have a 34-year-old AJ Green currently as wide receiver 3. Now, Rondale Moore showed in the first couple weeks of the 2021 season his potential, but it never really materialized after that. I like that Rondale Moore brings a different skill set to the table than a Marquise Brown and AJ Green, and Rondale Moore should fill in at the slot position that saw Christian Kirk provide some fantasy success with almost 1,000 yards last year. Next, we have the Atlanta Falcons, and my sleeper for the Falcons is quarterback Marcus Mariota. Now, I will admit it was kind of hard to find a sleeper for the Falcons because I think the 3 players that are actually going to be fantasy relevant for them, Cordell Patterson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, none of them obviously qualify for this video. However, maybe in Superflex or 2 quarterback leagues or just leagues with 16, 18 teams, Mariota could be a sleeper this year. He does have 1 year under his belt as a top 13 fantasy quarterback in 2016. And what I like about Mariota is that he can run the ball, which is kind of the fantasy cheat code for quarterbacks. He could take the Ryan Tannehill career path where he doesn't do so well with his original team, and eventually moves on to another team, and he plays well. And to me, Mariota is going to go all out. He needs to play well to keep his job from Desmond Ridder, so he's going to do whatever he can to do that. Coming up next, we have the Carolina Panthers, and my sleeper for them is wide receiver Robbie Anderson. And I was a little shocked that, according to Fantasy Calculator, that Robbie Anderson was not even being drafted in most leagues. Did you know that from 2017 to 2020 that Robbie Anderson finished in the top 40 for wide receivers every single year? And that includes 2 years as a wide receiver 2. Now, last year was a disaster for the Panthers overall as a team, and definitely for Robbie Anderson, but with a better quarterback this year and a more consistent offense, why can't Robbie Anderson finish in the top 40 again, which is good value for a guy that's not even being drafted? Next on our list, we have the Chicago Bears, and my sleeper for the Bears is tight end Cole Kmet. Now, Kmet barely qualified for this video, and I'm glad he did because I don't know who else I would choose for the Bears. Now, in order to be relevant for a fantasy tight end, you really have to be either the number 1 or the number 2 target getter on your team. And that was the case for Cole Kmet last year, and I don't really see that changing this year. Now, I know Komet only finished as tight end 21 in half PPR leagues, but he kind of had a weird season in that he didn't catch a touchdown at all. If he adds maybe 10 more catches and, maybe 100 more yards and 4 or 5 touchdowns, he's going to be startable in fantasy football as a tight end. And did you know that half of the tight ends that finish in the top 5 or 6 every year, they all come from tight ends that were drafted after the 12th round? We're moving on to the Dallas Cowboys, and my sleeper for the Cowboys is rookie wide receiver Jalen Tolbert. Now, this one technically qualifies as a sleeper due to ADP, but I think a lot of people realize that Jalen Tolbert's probably going to see wide receiver 2 snaps with Gallup maybe not being able to play the first few games of the season. And even with Gallup back, Tolbert could provide some fantasy value as he's on a good offense with a good quarterback. And we have the Detroit Lions up next, and my sleeper for them is running back Jamal Williams. I think it's pretty clear at this point in his career what we have from Jamal Williams, a guy who can run the ball, a guy who can catch the ball, and it's evident that the Lions coaching staff likes him, and they're going to use him. And, he's playing behind a running back who has to prove that he can stay healthy. So I like grabbing Jamal Williams. He has value even if DeAndre Swift doesn't get hurt, and he has huge value if Swift does get hurt. And now on to the Green Bay Packers, and my sleeper for them is rookie wide receiver Romeo Doubs, who's been getting a lot of hype this offseason. Now, what makes Doubs so intriguing is that he could possibly be the wide receiver 2 for Aaron Rodgers, and that is just too hard to pass up at times. Now, Doubs has been impressing in preseason. He has 2 touchdown catches in preseason games, and he put together a solid college career at Nevada, so there's definitely potential for Doubs as a sleeper. And next up, we have the Los Angeles Rams. Now, this was a bit of a tough one because most of the Rams players don't qualify. Stafford, Akers, Henderson, Kupp, Al Robinson, they don't qualify. They're being drafted too high to qualify as sleepers for this video. However, the sleeper I chose is rookie running back Kyren Williams. And the couple things I like about Kyren Williams is that, he's only behind Henderson, who is his whole career is kind of injury prone, and Cam Akers, who's, maybe still coming back from an Achilles injury, a type of injury that is basically spells the end of your career if you're a running back. And the other thing I like about him is that he can catch the ball. In college, he had 2 seasons where he had 35 receptions and 42 receptions, and that's a lot for college football. That's in 12 games, and college teams generally throw a little less to their running back. So if you see a running back that has over 40 catches in the season, that's really, really good. Next up, we have the Minnesota Vikings, and my sleeper for them is wide receiver KJ Osborne. And KJ Osborne is quite possibly my favorite sleeper of the entire NFL for the 2022 season. There's a few things I like about Osborne. One of them is that he's already the 3rd receiver on the depth chart, and the wide receiver 2 is getting up there in age, Adam Thielen, and he has a little bit of an injury history behind him. And another thing I like is that I think the Minnesota Vikings offense is going to be really, really good. They have a new head coach who comes from the Rams organization, and they're going to throw the ball a lot more than they did in previous years. And the last thing I like about KJ Osborne is that he has value with or without an injury. Look at last year, where he started off the season with 7 catches, 5 catches, for almost over 160 yards, and he finished the year with 5 touchdowns in the last 6 games. So he has value even if Thielen is there the whole year. And if Thielen goes down, he has huge value. And next up, we have the New Orleans Saints, and my sleeper for them is quarterback Jameis Winston. Now, I know a lot of you may be laughing. However, Jameis Winston's last full season playing every single game, he was quarterback 3 that year. And that's with throwing 30 interceptions. And he was actually playing pretty well the first 7 weeks of the 2021 season, where he had, I believe, 14 touchdowns and was kind of on pace for an over 30-plus touchdown year until he got hurt, of course. So I really do believe that Jameis Winston has value, and he's kind of the perfect quarterback to pair up if you take a chance on someone like Justin Fields or a Trey Lance. Next up, we have the New York Giants, and my sleeper for them is wide receiver Sterling Shepard. Now, Daniel Jones loves Sterling Shepard, and Sterling Shepard is currently not even being drafted in most fantasy football drafts. I believe the Giants just recently announced that they're going to take him off the PUP list, so he should be ready to play. And if you look at some of his stats, there were games last year when Shepard and Daniel Jones were both healthy where he was getting hyper targeted with 9, 10, 14, even 7 targets. This is what you want to see from your fantasy receivers. So why not take a shot on a still young Sterling Shepard? And next we have the Philadelphia Eagles. This was another tough team because when I first came to them, I thought, oh, definitely Kenneth Gainwell, but apparently he's been going much higher in drafts recently. So this was a hard one to choose from, but ultimately I went with running back Boston Scott. Now, Boston Scott, it really will only provide value if Miles Sanders gets hurt, but I do think the Eagles are going to be a pretty good team this year, and they're going to score a lot of points. So if Sanders does get hurt, Boston Scott has shown that he can come in and he can put up big games. So that's why he's my sleeper for the Eagles. And we're coming near the end of our NFC teams, and we have the San Francisco 49ers, and my sleeper for them is running back Jeff Wilson Jr., and of course it would be a running back for the 49ers. Now, what makes Jeff Wilson Jr. a sleeper is that he's on the 49ers, and they seem to have a different running back every year who becomes their lead back. But also, Elijah Mitchell hasn't and probably won't participate in any of the training camp this year. And to me, that's a big red flag. So Jeff Wilson Jr., step right up, potentially the lead back for the 49ers. And we are into the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks were yet another difficult team to choose from because the very few players that I think are going to have fantasy impacts are being drafted and don't qualify for the sleeper tag for this video. But I eventually chose running back Travis Homer, mostly because he's the next guy up if Rashad Penny, who has a history of getting injured, and Kenneth Walker, who has hernia problems. So if both of those guys are out, Travis Homer will be the running back 1 for the Seattle Seahawks. And the second to last team on this video is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and my sleeper for them is wide receiver Russell Gage, who before the Julio Jones signing, I don't know if he would have qualified for this, but after the Julio Jones signing, he does qualify, and I really like Russell Gage this year because Julio Jones is much older. Godwin still might have problems coming back from the ACL injury, and we're on a high volume passing team that's probably going to throw for 5,000 yards and 40 plus touchdowns. And Russell Gage has proven he can be a fantasy relevant wide receiver. He had a stretch in 2020 where he was a top 24 receiver, and he had a stretch in 2021 in the last 6 weeks or so of the 2021 season where he was actually a top 10 receiver and helped win you leagues. And the last team on this video is the Washington Commanders, and my sleeper for them is rookie receiver Jahan Dotson. And I don't really understand why Dotson doesn't get much hype compared to the other first round wide receivers that were drafted in the 2022 NFL draft. Now, Dotson is already the wide receiver 2 for the Commanders, and their wide receiver 1, Terry McLaurin, is a good player, but he's not a clear number 1, no-brainer alpha player. Dotson, he could be the best receiver on this team. It could be a situation of the T. Higgins and Jamar Chase, where T. Higgins was the number 1 in 2020, and then Jamar Chase is drafted, and it's clear that Chase is the alpha. Same thing could happen here, and Dotson could be the wide receiver 1 for the Commanders. Thank you all again so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment and tell me about your sleepers for this fantasy season. We'll be back with part 2 of this video series with the AFC teams, and until then, I'll catch you guys later.